Just as the saying, birds of a feather flock together, Vic Amuso and Nicky Scarfo didn't represent any ordinary birds. They were vultures who formed a close friendship from the confines of their cages. To start with, Nicodemo Scarfo was 5 years to Vittorio Amuso Sr., both small in height. Ironically, they each had the word little preceding their names. Speaking of which, names that were Italian in nature, and both who preferred the English versions. Nonetheless, they both held the title of boss. Amuso, a boss of one of the New York Five families, and Scarfo, who ruled Philadelphia. They do differ in how they came to be bosses. On March 15, 1981, Philadelphia boss Phil Testa was killed by a nail bomb, leaving a leadership void in his family. Consequently, the Genovese family appointed Scarfo as the boss of Philadelphia. On February 25, 1985, the government indicted and arrested several New York bosses, including those of the Lucchese family, in what would become known as the Commission Case. Lucchese boss Tony Ducks Corallo obviously seen the handwriting on the wall, which was that he and his administration were among the indicted and more likely would be convicted. He decided to install a new boss as well as an administration for the sake of his family. His choice for a successor was Bronx captain Anthony Buddy Luongo, and he left the administration choices up to his consigliere, Christy Tick Forneri, who chose Vic Amuso and Gaspipe Casso, members of his crew. In late 1986, Luongo was summoned to a meeting at the 19th Hole Social Club in Brooklyn and was subsequently killed by Amuso, Casso, and Amuso's brother Bobby. With Luongo out of the way, Amuso became boss of the family. Looking at both scenarios, it's apparent that Scarfo was appointed to his position, and conversely, Amuso used treachery as a means to gain the top spot. Regarding the Philadelphia family, Scarfo solely called the shots, whereas Amuso was frequently impacted by his underboss, Gaspipe Casso. In light of this fact, it was Scarfo who demonstrated and possessed a more domineering personality. During their reign as leaders, Amuso and Scarfo both ordered numerous senseless killings. Two murders that come to mind, I believe, displays the treachery that ran through both their veins. The first being the 1984 murder of Salvi Testa, as well as the 1990 murder of Bruno Facciolo. Both killings demonstrate that loyalty is by no means rewarded with loyalty in return, but rather by bullets. In the blink of an eye, Amuso and Scarfo would order someone to be killed. How Scarfo differed is all that he needed was to get a bug up his ass, and that person would go. Amuso, more times than not, would first place a false label on the intended victim. Chiodo, a Lucchese captain that Amuso had shot in an attempt to kill him, testified to a conversation he once had with the Lucchese boss, who admitted, "They say I kill my friends." Amuso's underboss was Gaspipe Casso, and according to Gaspipe, it was he who chose the number 2 position, while letting Amuso be the boss. Scarfo decided to keep it in the family and placed his nephew, Phil Leonetti, as his underboss. Ironically, Gaspipe and Leonetti, for one reason or another, would both turn on their bosses. Scarfo's time as a boss would come to an end first. He was arrested on January 8, 1987, at an Atlantic City airport, and from 1987 to 89, he would be convicted in several cases, and ultimately received sentences of 14 and 55 years. Amuso was arrested on July 29, 1991, at a Scranton, Pennsylvania mall. He too faced several indictments and was convicted and sentenced in October 1992, where he received a life sentence. Eventually, Amuso and Scarfo would be housed together at Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. An essential necessity to doing time is having friends. Guys in prison will find each other, and I've witnessed this. I remember an old-timer explaining to me why they watch new inmates for a few days. His reasoning was to see who the guy gravitates to, and he taught me to begin watching. Years later, there was an Italian kid who came in. During his first day, he stood in the yard watching a touch football game. He looked normal enough, but remembering what I was taught, I told the guys to give him a few more days. Sure enough, on the third day, he entered the mess hall wearing tight pants, a pink sweatshirt, and some kind of makeup on his cheeks. And after that, he flocked to the homosexuals and booty bandits. So it's only natural that Amuso and Scarfo became close friends while in prison. One of the initial topics of conversation between the two bosses was the state of the Philadelphia mob. Following Scarfo's incarceration, the Philadelphia family experienced an internal struggle for control. Scarfo sought Amuso's help, whose family happened to operate in northern New Jersey. One of the most important issues for Scarfo was that on October 31st, 1989, his son Nicky Jr. was having dinner in Dante and Luigi's, a South Philadelphia restaurant, when a masked shooter walked in and shot him several times. The shooter then ran and disposed of his weapon on the sidewalk. Despite being shot several times, Nicky Jr. fortunately survived. Amuso, who also had a son, understood the seriousness of Scarfo's dilemma and his urgency to protect his son. So to put Scarfo's mind at ease, he offered a solution where he would have Nicky Jr. inducted into his family. By doing this, it also protected him from further attempts. Amuso also tried in assisting Scarfo to reclaim control over his former family, which at the time was involved in an internal war. When the opposing faction became victorious, Amuso went out of his way to make it known that as far as he was concerned, they were not to be recognized. The friendship of Amuso and Scarfo also led to other things, like becoming unindicted co-conspirators in 2011. Scarfo Jr. would not only be inducted, but eventually became the captain of the Lucchese's Jersey faction, a position he would eventually be taken down from. I've been told that he's highly intelligent, which is no surprise that he was involved in a multi-million-dollar scam, one where he helped take over Texas-based company First Plus Financial Group. So when the indictment came down, his father and Amuso were listed as unindicted co-conspirators. Scarfo Jr., after being convicted, received a 30-year sentence for his involvement. There are many photos floating around of Amuso and Scarfo in prison, and you could tell their friendship was a strong one. I've heard that Vic, who was a person who always enjoyed exercising, specifically playing racquetball, had the older Scarfo keeping in shape as well. Scarfo would live to the ripe age of 87 and died of natural causes at the Federal Medical Center in Butler, North Carolina on January 13, 2017. So far, Amuso has outlived Scarfo by 2 years and is currently also in Butner. Butner is a facility where inmates, typically older in age and with ailments, go to die. One viewer wanted to know why so many federal inmates all die at Butner. I explained it's because prior to their transfer to Butner, like I mentioned, they had some kind of an illness. Please remember to like this video if you haven't already. And for anyone who wants to show their appreciation for videos like this or help keep this podcast going, you can do so by the Super Thanks icon down below or the PayPal Cash App links in the video's description. Naturally, I'm sure Amuso misses his pal Scarfo. Despite the few differences in them, they were a lot alike. And no surprise that they gravitated to one another. They must have discussed the current state of the mob on their many walks in the prison yard, which I heard was a common sight, both of them going for a walk. We'll never know if either of them had any regrets. I highly doubt it. They both made their share of mistakes in decision-making as bosses. I'm sure many conversations involved cursing Gaspipe and Leonetti. That's a given. Presently, Vic is 89 years old and will be 90 in a few weeks. I'm sure he knows his time is coming to an end. For Amuso and Scarfo, they had the good fortune of being placed in the same facility, helping their time go by more easily by way of their friendship. One boss was left behind, still serving the remainder of his life. He too will get to fly free with his friend and fellow vulture to places unknown.